Hi, I'm Blythe Stephens of A Blythe Coach, dance education and coaching to move through life with balance, grace, and power. And today I'm bringing you, by request, a hip opening, rotation, and stretching regimen. So it's a basic stretching exercise that will be a nice support for ballet dancers and dancers of other styles who want to add a bit more stretching to balance their strengthening training. So let's get started. To begin with, I'm sitting up on a block, which you may also want one or two of these or something similar, a thick book or folded blanket or a pillow to support some of these stretches. So we all have stretching or flexibility strengths and also weaknesses. As you'll see, some of these stretches are easier for me than others. But when you're finding that it feels a little bit limited in your range of motion, it can help to use a block either under the pelvis or in some cases behind the knees, as I will show you. So I'm going to start sitting up on my block just to demonstrate how we get that started. So I root either whether I'm sitting onto the floor or onto my block, I'm rooting down, really feeling equal weight on both sides of the pelvis and onto both sit bones underneath me. And then I also want to find a neutral pelvic position to start with. So I'll rotate the hips forward and back, sort of like our yoga cat-cow shapes. And then find somewhere in the middle that allows me to feel really relaxed in the seated position and long through the spine. I started with a cross-legged position, but from there we're going to move into a classic butterfly stretch with the feet together and the knees apart. So traditionally we do cue this saying bring the heels in as close as you can to the pelvis. That's great, but I encourage you to experiment with the angle here, whether it's more of a really skinny diamond or a broader one, because this will impact the sensation in the stretch. And we want to create a variety of stretches since there's a variety of muscles that are all supporting and working hard in the hip area, but also needing a bit more release. So play with those angles. Don't feel like it always needs to be as close as possible to the pelvis. That said, once we've chosen a form to start with, we will endeavor to stay there and let ourselves relax into that stretch for at least 10 seconds, ideally 30 seconds or longer, to allow the initial stretch reflex that tenses the muscles a bit. It's a good protective mechanism. The body thinks it's being injured, but we're not going to do any sudden or forceful movements that would injure us. Be very careful and please do consult with your appropriate medical professional about this. But in general, go very easy and light, slowly sinking in. So from this butterfly or Baddha Konasana shape, I will take my long spine and then slowly tip it forward over the thigh bones. So I'm making a long diagonal with length through the top of my head here, tipping forward as if I'm gazing into a pond or off a boat and into the ocean here, and then become mindful of the flow of my breath. That helps me support staying in this stretch. The soles of the feet can be very firmly pressed together, and you can even clasp them with the hands, or we can also allow the outer edges of the feet to remain connected and the bottoms of the feet to open a bit towards the sky like a book. Both are fine. With every inhale, feeling a bit more length and lightness through the spine. And with the exhale, we'll tip a bit more forward. So I'll experiment with this without a block too, find the version that works for you. What I also enjoy doing here as I'm tipping forward and sinking into this stretch more deeply, sometimes the neck or the shoulders can also feel some tension. So I can take a block or maybe two blocks and put them on top of the feet or on top of the floor and then let my head lean onto that. So if I'm finally reaching that angle where the neck's a little bit stressed, then I'll place that there and then the neck can completely relax, focusing the stretch in the hip joints and the surrounding muscles. With every inhale going longer, and with the exhale sinking deeper. At the end, we can go ahead and allow the back to round. And lingering here as long as you like. I won't stick around quite as long as I might like. I want to show you these forms, and then if you're able to stay longer, then please do. You can pause the video and then start it again when we are moving on to the next form when you're ready. Butterfly, absolutely a classic. To get out of this, I can use my hands to support the knees and bring them to close. And I also like to reach the hands or the forearms behind me, resting there, and let the legs fall to one side and the other side. A little bit of a windshield wiper action, releasing through the hips and lower back. And that's one of the things I really love about hip stretching. It certainly gives me greater range of motion for dance, which is important in ballet especially, but for anything where you want as broad a range of motion as possible. And also to balance the strengthening training that we do, but also because everything is connected, the stretching that I do for my pelvis and my hips has a positive influence as well in the lower back, which for many of us also experiences tension, especially when we're sitting more than ever these days. So, first one is our butterfly stretch. Next, we'll take a figure four stretch, either reclining, seated, or another variation of that. So depending on your starting place with your hip flexibility, one of these versions will be better for you than the others. So the reclining version of our figure four stretch, we are laying onto the back. It can be nice whenever I go to lay on the back for a hip stretch to start by massaging the pelvis on the floor. I'll do this by circling the knees with the hands one direction and the other way. Feels super great. Or the knees can even go opposite directions. Anything goes here for a nice little hip joint capsule massage. And then this is also a great place, by the way, to practice our butterfly stretch as a completely passive stretch. So there's less muscular involvement. It's totally just gravity opening the thighs. That can be a really nice relaxation pose. Or the opposite, where the knees are falling in, is super great as well. But here we have the feet parallel to start with, and we'll bring one ankle bone over the top of the other knee, reaching the hands through like threading a needle, one hand between the thighs, one on the outside, and then either with an extended leg underneath, drawing that towards us, or here at a 90-degree angle is also great. Or if you prefer, we can also reach, if that feels okay, in front of the lower leg and shin bone and draw back there. So as I pull my left leg in this case that I'm clasping with the hands towards me, I'm pressing the right thigh steadily away. And then I'll linger here for at least several breaths. And then I'll change to the other side. So if that's your preferred variation, go ahead and stay there and try it out. Then the next variation of that form, we are seated with one foot next to the hip, and we'll bring the other one across over the top of the other thigh and onto the floor. Then we'll draw that knee in towards us like a nice firm hug, growing long through the spine throughout. Then I can play here a little bit until I find the right stretch for me in this moment, stretching long, pausing and breathing, and then maintaining that stretch in the hips. It might be fun also to take a twist. So I'll rotate through the whole length of the spine on top of that hip stretch. I can use this arm to help. And I can also stretch the other way. Great. So if that's your chosen variation today, fantastic. Linger there or in the reclining figure 4 stretch, or a couple more variations, either to build on now or later. I have, some call it a fire log stretch, double pigeon in yoga, or I've even heard Lincoln logs. We'll take that ankle all the way over the top of the knee. So we want to make sure that this is not turning into an ankle stretch with the foot here. That's great too, but it does not focus the intensity and the stretch in the hips. So I'll bring the ankle all the way over with a flexed foot. So I'm really concentrating that stretch in the pelvis. And then stacking the shin bones. They don't need to be perfectly parallel. Maybe there'll be some space. That can be a nice spot actually to use my block for a bit more support while I stretch. Or I can sit onto the block, of course. And then once again, with every inhale, I'll grow long through the spine, rooted through both sit bones. And then I'll rotate forward, bringing the hip bones closer to the thighs. The hands can come out in front of me, or they can be placed onto the legs. Inhaling longer, exhaling deeper. Maybe the forearms come to the ground, maybe not. It's not important that the shape look like mine or like anybody else's. We're trying to find our right stretching place here to increase our own range of motion. And that's going to happen slowly and incrementally over time. It won't help us to suddenly force our hips to any particular shape. In fact, we might injure ourselves, and that would be a step backward in our training. And then linger there as long as you like. And the final variation of this stretch that I want to show you today would be more like a letter T, a capital T. So we'll bring the thighs closer together, one on top of the other, and then the shin bones to a 90-degree angle. You can also bring the feet in like this, one thigh on top of thigh and the feet closer to the hips. That certainly is a nice stretch as well. But I'm going to try for the T today. This is probably better for me after I'm well warmed up. So after ballet class or after bar, before center, or if you're an athlete of another stripe, you might want to do this after your run as a nice place to stretch, open the hips. So again, in the T shape, rooting down through both sides of the pelvis. Inhaling to lengthen, exhaling to fold forward. And then we'll take the other side.